What's up, everybody? Tom Pelissero here at the Breakers Resort in Palm Beach, Florida. NFL meetings wrapping up today. It's been a crazy 72 hours here right now. They're actually voting on some of the rule changes, so we should get word on that in a little bit. But I wanted just to sit down and do a quick video because Leslie Frazier addressed one of the key issues at basically every spot on the depth chart today. I thought some of the answers were interesting. I'm just going to run down it right through, straight through position by position here. Starting at quarterback. One of the things I thought was interesting was about Joe Webb and the role that Webb is going to play for the Vikings this season. What they want to do, Frazier, you remember back at the scouting combine talked about they want to make Joe Webb a quarterback. What he really means is they want to try to see if Joe Webb can do the exact things they're asking Christian Ponder to do within the offense. Now, clearly these guys have different sorts of skill sets. Webb is a better athlete than Christian Ponder, and he does so many things with his feet, but a lot of times what Frazier feels they've done is they've had him hone in on the things that he already does well. What they want to find out is, can Joe Webb run the offense that Bill Musgrave runs? They hired Musgrave to install this offense. They drafted Christian Ponder to run it, and there's a strong belief within the organization that Ponder can run it and run it well. But can Webb run it? They don't want to go away from Musgrave's offense with their starting quarterback. So it's going to be really interesting to see, can Joe Webb drop back and deliver throws in rhythm? He's done it in small spurts. He's also, though, when he's had a larger body of work, at times he's struggled. So will be interesting to see. Frazier didn't rule him out as far as using him in packages as well, but they want to see what happens if they actually put him in there and give him true quarterback reps, not wildcat reps, no reps at receiver. There's no plans to do that again. They want to see what happens if he's just at the quarterback position. That's going to be one thing to really keep an eye on through the OTAs and the mini camps, which start a little bit later than normal this season. The running back position, they want to add a third back. They want to go outside the current roster. They didn't tender Lorenzo Booker. They did sign Lex Hillier, but he's looked at as more of a special teams guy. They want to find out if there's a third back they can add, because Adrian Peterson's beginning running this week. He's right on schedule, if not a little bit ahead in his rehab, but there's still no guarantees about what he's going to do in week one. And if you remember back to the combine when Frazier told me that he'd be thrilled if Adrian Peterson were able to play 15 to 20 snaps in week one, that leaves you with a question, particularly because what happens if Toby Gerhart gets nicked up? What if you're going into that game and you don't have Gerhart either? They've got to get another back because they don't entirely trust that Peterson is going to be where they hope he's going to be. That's something that could come through the draft. You also could see a guy that maybe there's somebody who gets cut after June 1st, maybe somebody who gets cut after the draft by a team that drafts a new back. I think that's one spot where you could see the Vikings make a move, and Frazier made very clear they still want to add another guy at that position. Out at receiver, Frazier made very clear they'll draft at least one, maybe two receivers. They really want to get a vertical speed threat sort of a receiver at the split end position to try to take away some of those boxes and also free up the middle of the field for those two tight ends they're going to use a lot in tandem, Kyle Rudolph and John Carlson. That's one of the things that they saw, and as I said to Frazier, even after Peterson's injury, the first injury, the ankle last year that caused him to miss 3 or 4 games, and then after the knee, you still saw people putting a bunch of guys in the box against Toby Gerhart. And no offense to Gerhart, but he's not Adrian Peterson. Part of it was nobody feared the vertical element of the Vikings offense. No one feared what they had on the perimeter outside of Percy Harvin, who does a lot of his work in the slot, and they got to move him around a lot so the teams can't double him. They want to see what happens now if we get an actual threat at the receiver position. I wouldn't be surprised if they draft a couple, because a lot of times you have to take bites at the apple, and you've got to take multiple shots at guys who might have one particular dominant trait, namely speed, and you got to see if they can put the other aspects of their game together. At the tight end position, not a lot of question marks right now. I think we know what they're going to do there. On the offensive line, I asked Frazier, if the season started today, and thank God for the Vikings it doesn't, what would be your starting five on the offensive line? He said it would have to be Charlie Johnson, still left tackle, because they don't really have anybody else. He said it would be Chris DeGear at one of the guard spots, Brandon Fusco at one of the guard spots, and then obviously Sullivan and Lodeholt. And where that confused me was they just signed Jeff Schwartz, and Frazier did say he sees Schwartz being able to fit into one of those guard positions. But he also asked, why no Joe Berger? Does he see him as more of a backup? He said, well, I think Joe would like me to say that he's a starter, but it's fairly clear that he doesn't look at Berger in that same light. He wants to see what the young guys do. DeGear's a guy who spent all last season on the practice squad. No one ever signed him. He came back last year. He was a little bit muscle-bound, lost some flexibility, was carrying too much weight, ended up being dropped from the first string all the way down to the third string. His position was changed. during the course of camp, but apparently they think he's going to be able to come back and be strong and pick up where he left off at the end of the 2010 season, where over the final 2 or 3 starts that he made down the stretch in place of Steve Hutchinson, he actually was really good in there. Or I shouldn't say really good. Let's temper that a little bit. He was serviceable. For a rookie, he was very good in there. On the defensive line, really the only question is what they're going to do at nose tackle, and Frazier made very clear he wants LaTroy Guion to be the starting nose tackle of the team. LaTroy had such a good preseason last year. He's a talented penetrator. Is he stout enough to take on double teams? Frazier said that he thinks he is. I haven't really seen that. We'll see what happens now if he takes all his reps at nose. What they hope is that by letting LaTroy focus on one position, he's still a young guy, he's 24 years old, but letting him focus in on one position, that's going to allow him to take some jumps in his game. So that's going to be something to monitor in camp. And Fred Evans, they re-signed to a 2-year deal. I think it's worth about $3 million, and they expect him to be in the rotation as well. At linebacker, the middle linebacker position is the question because they re-signed Aaron Henderson to go along with Chad Greenway on the outside. Aaron could potentially be a candidate at middle linebacker. I think that they like him a lot better on the outside where he's able to run a little bit from that weak side position. Jasper Brinkley is the clear favorite to start a Mike linebacker unless they end up getting into May and June and decide, okay, we'll bring E.J. Henderson back just to give him one more shot. I think they want to find out what they have in Jasper Brinkley. I think they want to see, though, does he progress the way that they wanted to coming off of that hip surgery? They haven't had their hands on him in a while. What sort of leaps is he going to be able to make through the offseason? Who knows? Maybe they get to a point in July and E.J. Henderson's still sitting out there and Leslie Frazier goes to Rick Spielman and just says, I don't think Jasper's the guy. If you don't think you have the guy, that's where I think you can potentially think about some of those older players. But for a 31-year-old middle linebacker with a titanium rod in his leg, I don't think there's going to be a huge marketplace for him, and I don't think that the Vikings are exactly eager to bring him back if they think they have somebody else who can fit in there. Frazier also said he expects them to take 1, maybe 2 linebackers in the draft because they're so depleted from a depth standpoint at that position. In the defensive backfield, they have no answers at safety, but we already knew that. Frazier said that they want to continue to develop Mr. Raymond. There's some positive qualities in him. What they like about Raymond is the fact that he's a taller guy, he's 6'1", has corner skills, played a lot of corner back in college at South Florida, so he can match up on some of those tight ends and these receiving type tight ends that people are now beginning to use more and more detached from the formation. So if you can rotate, if you're not in those 2 deep concepts, if you're playing a single high safety, maybe Raymond's the guy who can come down and check a guy at the line. He's got to get a lot stronger. He got run over some last season. They want to continue developing him. Jamarcus Sanford, he wasn't exactly warm on Jamarcus Sanford, and I said exactly what I think they think of Sanford, which is he's a really good special teamer. He's probably not a lot more. And that's a position, too, that Frazier pointed out they may look to address with multiple picks in the draft. Plug in a couple of guys at safety, get someone who can contribute immediately. It's always a cautionary tale when you're looking at trying to expect rookies to contribute immediately, particularly if they're not first-round picks, maybe second-round picks. Anybody the rest of the draft, there's some development that generally has to be done. Frazier said a stat that there were only something like 16 rookies in the league who were impact rookies in 2011. I think the lockout probably hurt a lot of guys in that regard, but clearly from year to year, if you look at it, there's not a ton of rookies who step in immediately and start the entire season. But Vikings are in a position they got to find some of those guys, and I think cornerback is another position where you're going to have to look for upgrades through the draft. They do have Chris Cook back. Antoine Winfield, my sense, I didn't get a chance to ask Frazier about it, but my sense is they prefer he be the full-time nickel, keep his snap count down so that they can keep him healthy, sort of preserve his body, and also not have to pay him as much because he only makes $3 million if he plays, I think it's around 50% of the snaps. His base salary did get dropped. They got to draft someone on the outside. Frazier was also asked about that number 3 pick, and he very coyly, big smile on his face, pointed out the benefits of drafting Matt Galil, Justin Blackman, or Morris Claiborne. The idea being, if everything is built around trying to help out your young quarterback and try to build through Christian Ponder, build this team around Christian Ponder, well, if you got a better cornerback, if you got a lockdown guy at one of those secondary spots, that's going to help you perhaps get the ball back a little bit sooner. If you got the receiver weapon, that's going to help you stretch the field, get someone who can beat man coverage and the ball can come out on time. Or if you get that left tackle, then you're going to be able to protect the quarterback, keep him upright. He's going to have a little bit more time to look down the field. I still believe Matt Galil is the guy. But clearly the Vikings also have to be looking and knowing that if they move back a couple of spots, my sense is they'd probably be content drafting either of those 3 guys. If they're at 3, Khalil's the sensible pick because I think that he's pretty clearly the number 3 player in the draft, maybe even the number 2 player in the draft, depending who you talk to about Robert Griffin III. I think that has to be the player, but if you trade back a spot or 2 because somebody wants to come up, then maybe you're ending up with one of those other guys too. And then in the end,